All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, just a couple of those normal items to take care of. We will have time for questions at the end today, and you can type those in by clicking the Q&A box in the lower portion of your control panel. We'll be posting a recording of the webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you would like a PDF copy of the presentation, there will be a link to download that on that same post as the recording. If your question does not get answered today, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. All right, so what do we have on the agenda for today? November is American Diabetes Month, so no better time just to take some time to touch base on it. We'll start with an overview of diabetes in general, including some facts, some risk factors, and symptoms to be aware of. We'll talk about some general misconceptions people have about preventing, about treating higher blood sugar. And then throughout the talk, we'll give you some thoughts on what you can control and some healthy options and ideas to try. One thing to keep in mind today, and I'll mention this again, but this information that we're sharing is for general knowledge and awareness to help blood sugar, right? This should not replace regular visits to your doctor regarding your blood sugar. And if you're currently diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes, please always work with your doctor or your diabetes educator, any specialist that you're working with on any changes you're thinking of making to your lifestyle. All right, so let's start with that overview. Most of you are probably somewhat familiar with diabetes and know there's maybe a few different types, things like that. But I want a quick refresher and I want to share some facts just so we're all on the same page. So what exactly is diabetes? Basically, it's a condition that affects how your body turns food into energy. Most of the food you eat is broken down into sugar or glucose, and then that's released into your bloodstream. When your blood sugar goes up, that signals your pancreas to release insulin. Insulin is like a key. It lets blood sugar into your body's cells, which they use as energy. Now, when you have diabetes, your body either doesn't make enough insulin or it can't use the insulin as well as it should. That means that blood sugar is going to stay in that bloodstream. This is a problem because that leads to other serious health issues, including things like heart disease, vision loss, kidney disease, things like that. So that's why we don't want that to be happening long term. We don't want a bunch of sugar in our blood. A couple of facts for you here too. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in the US. It is the #1 cause of kidney failure, lower limb amputations, and adult blindness. And in the last 20 years, the number of adults diagnosed with diabetes has more than doubled. It's a huge problem, but it's also a problem that can be helped by not super complicated things. So keep that in mind as we're talking today. There are 3 main types of diabetes. We've got type 1, type 2, and gestational. Type 1 is the least kind of lifestyle affected type, as there really is currently no known way to prevent type 1. It's thought that it's caused by an autoimmune reaction where the body attacks itself by mistake and then it stops making insulin. About 5 to 10%, of people who have diabetes are type 1. It's usually diagnosed in children, teens, and young adults. Not always, but usually. And so people with type 1 have to take insulin every day. Their body doesn't produce it. So type 1, and then we have type 2, which means your body doesn't use the insulin it makes well, and it can't regulate the amount of sugar in your blood. This is by far the most common type and is usually diagnosed in adults, but unfortunately is becoming more common in children, teens, and young adults due to things like dietary reasons or lack of physical activity. Gestational diabetes is diabetes that develops in pregnant women who did not have diabetes previously. This usually goes away after the baby is born, sometimes not, but it also increases your risk for type 2 diabetes later in life. There's a few other specific conditions that can cause diabetes as well, but those are rare and again, not necessarily lifestyle based. So I'm just going to stick with these 3, technically 4 with prediabetes. So with that, with prediabetes, I saved this one for last because I wanted to touch on this a bit more in depth because of how prevalent it is in the US and how really we can utilize, if we're in that range, we can really make the most changes if you have prediabetes. So that simply means that your blood sugar numbers, they're higher than what we'd want it to be, but not high enough that you'd be diagnosed as a full-on diabetic. So at the bottom of this slide is the prevalence of diabetes and prediabetes. 34.2 million people in the US have diabetes, which is 10% of the total population. 7.3 million of those people are technically undiagnosed, meaning they either don't know they have it or they're not treating it properly. 88 million adults in the US currently have prediabetes, again, where that number is higher than what we want it. This is over 1/3 of our entire population. That's a staggering number. What's even more staggering is that 84% of those people don't know they have it, which means they're likely not making the proper changes to help, right? The levels typically used to determine if someone has prediabetes include fasting blood sugar or glucose, which shows your blood sugar levels over the past 10 to 12 hours or so without any food or drinks affecting it. And then the A1C, which indicates how your blood sugar has been over a longer period of time, the past 2 to 3 months. A fasting glucose of 100 to 125 and an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4 are the levels where a doctor may take a closer look to determine if that diagnosis of prediabetes is warranted. Anything under that is what we typically think is normal. So under 100, under that 5.7. An A1C of a 6.5 or higher is the accepted threshold of a diabetes diagnosis, as well as a fasting glucose of 126 or higher. Now, since that fasting blood sugar is a much shorter measure, doctors are typically going to look more closely at that other number, the A1C, for actual diagnosis. There are other tests. There's an oral glucose tolerance test, where you get your levels checked before and after drinking a special drink. If you've been pregnant before and you've had to go in, if your numbers are a little higher, this is usually what they would do if you get those higher blood sugar results to determine if you have gestational diabetes. You can also have a random, or it's called casual sometimes, plasma glucose test that's not fasting, and then it can be taken any time of the day, and there's different levels for that one. That's usually done more if you have symptoms already as well. Now, a note here, you may see these numbers, or I hope you see these numbers on your Health Check 360 screening, right? Those numbers are to create that awareness of your biometrics and to trigger necessary conversations with your doctor if needed, right? But we're not diagnosing any illness or disease. If you see your blood sugar numbers in these little higher ranges, next step, discuss them with your doctor, determine what, if there is a diagnosis, but we're not diagnosing anything. Our job is to make you aware with our screening. So let's touch on some risk factors for diabetes and prediabetes next. Now, again, type 1 isn't quite as clear. Family history is a factor. And like I mentioned earlier, it's usually diagnosed in children, teens, and young adults. So being younger is not technically a risk factor, but that's where we usually see it. Risk factors for type 2 diabetes include having prediabetes already, being overweight, being 45 or older, family history, physically active less than 3 times per week, which is pretty interesting, having gestational diabetes, which I mentioned already, or having a baby who weighed more than 9 pounds at birth, having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then African Americans, Hispanic, Latino Americans, American Indians, and Alaska Natives typically have a higher risk of developing diabetes. Those items that are starred are also risk factors for developing prediabetes as well, which kind of makes sense. It goes hand in hand, right? Now, one thing I want to note is as you look at these risk factors, there's obviously some that are outside of your control, right? But the ones like physical activity and controlling weight as much as you can, even a small amount of weight loss, by adopting healthy habits can be a huge, huge, huge factor in preventing diabetes or even delaying diabetes. We'll talk about this more in a few minutes with things, but I just want you to know those factors, while there's only a couple on here, they make a huge difference. Before we jump into actual habits and things, let's talk about what to look for with symptoms when it comes to diabetes. Now, some of the outward symptoms of diabetes include urinating more often, especially at night, a lot more thirst, losing weight without trying, very hunger, lots and lots of hunger, blurry vision, numb or tingling hands or feet, being tired, having dry skin, having sores that don't heal in a normal time frame, and then more infections than normal. Again, you don't have to have all of these. Just keep in mind if you've got some things going on. That's just something for you to keep in mind to chat with doctor about. Type 1 diabetics can also suffer from nausea, vomiting, and stomach pains. Now, type 1 symptoms usually can develop very quickly and can be really severe. Type 2 symptoms usually take much longer, years, in fact, to develop. And some people don't have any symptoms at all, which both of those reasons are why it's so important to get your levels tested regularly, to know the risk factors you may have, and also just to take care of your health in general, right? All right, so the webinar is called Fact or Fiction. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions that are out there when it comes to diabetes. I talked with our phenomenal condition management team. They help participants prevent and live with diabetes every single day. I talked to them about some of the misconceptions they hear from people that they wish everyone would know, and also some things and tips, which will be on the next slide, that they just want everyone who has diabetes or is working to prevent diabetes, they just want people to know. The first misconception is, hey, I know my blood sugar numbers are maybe a little high, but I'm still young, it's fine, I'm not at risk. All right, while being 45 and older is a risk factor for developing actual diabetes, I already mentioned that there are more and more young adults and children being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, right? Also, if your blood sugar is a little high now, it is a million times easier to change small habits now if your numbers are a little high than to have to make massive lifestyle changes after you would say get diagnosed with diabetes in even 10 or 15 years, right? Prevention is always easier than treatment, and it's usually a lot cheaper too, if I'm being honest. Next misconception, I don't have type 2 diabetes in my family, so I'm good to go. Again, while family history is a risk factor, there are plenty of people who develop it with no family history whatsoever. Your habits and your lifestyle do matter in type 2 diabetes specifically. Exercise is unsafe for diabetics. This is a big myth as well. Exercise can be an extremely great way to control your blood sugar. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that if you've already been diagnosed with diabetes, you do need to talk with your doctor about what type of exercise is safe, how much, slowly go into it. Typically, always monitor your sugars so you don't get too low during or after a session. So super great benefits to exercise. Just make sure you're doing it in a safe way. Some other things our team hears, I can stop taking my meds once my numbers are down or I feel better. Now, with any medication, you should not stop taking it until a doctor advises you to do so. This is not like an antibiotic that's a quick fix. It takes time to regulate your numbers, and you need to continue to take it, and then also make those lifestyle changes that you and your doctor talk about to help prevent some of those long-term issues that I mentioned earlier. On that same note, some medications can cause some short-term side effects like digestive issues or nausea, but they should subside. So again, talk with your doctor if you're having concerns, but don't stop taking medication without chatting with them. Along similar lines, well, my doctor started me on medication, so I can do and I can eat whatever I want. That unfortunately is the mentality sometimes, but it should never be the mentality with any medications you take. You should think of those medications as short-term to control, to get those numbers down, but it should not be a long-term thing in your mind typically. Obviously, there's exceptions, but with diabetes specifically, you need to make lifestyle changes to help support that medication that you're on. If you don't, you can still get some of those negative long-term effects, as that medication's not going to be able to support you alone if you're not helping as well. And there's also a chance that you can get off diabetes medication by making those changes with your nutrition, with your exercise, with stress, with sleep. So don't give up. You can control a ton when it comes to this condition specifically. You have a lot of power with your blood sugar. So don't give up. Do what you can, control what you can control as well. And then the last one that they hear sometimes is I can't eat fruit. Now, fruit does have natural sugars, right? But they're also rich in nutrients like fiber, which actually can help promote healthy blood sugar levels by slowing the absorption of sugars. Now, if you're concerned with the amount of sugar in fruits, you can always opt for the lower sugar options like berries. They're typically on the lower side. But again, while you shouldn't only eat fruit and you still need to keep an eye on those total numbers, you need, proper protein, you need fats, you need all that good stuff, but you can absolutely include fruits in your daily menu. All right, so let's go to some of those tips that our condition management team wanted to pass along that really they just wish everyone knew about managing blood sugars and diabetes in general. First is to check with your insurance to see if they cover a continuous glucose monitor, which, as that name suggests, it continuously monitors those numbers, which can be extremely helpful as you manage your levels. Now, so some insurance companies will cover those, or plans will cover them. So it's worth checking, right? Make a phone call, see if it's available for you. And then along the lines of having a monitor, no matter what type it is, you should know how to use it. Our team talks to people regularly that they don't know how to use them. They don't know what range their doctor wants them in if they are testing, or when to check their levels. The best piece of advice is to bring that monitor in with you to an appointment and get a hands-on tutorial. And then share the results with your doctor. A lot of times people monitor their levels because, hey, my doctor told me to, but then they don't share that information. That's the reason that you're monitoring it, is to work with your doctor to determine if you're within where you should be and if changes need to be made. So don't forget to share that information too. Another suggestion from our team, if you're diagnosed with diabetes or prediabetes, ask to be put in touch with a diabetic educator or specialist. Again, like that name suggests, they're experts when it comes to helpful advice on nutrition and all the things that you can be doing to help lower your numbers. And then keep up with regular appointments too. There's various tests that need to be done to help monitor your overall health if you have diabetes. There's eye exams, there's different labs that are suggested that will help catch any issues that may come up. So again, just keep up with everything you need to. Next thing is just to educate yourself. Again, diabetic educator and your doctor are great resources, and then you can help yourself as well. There's websites. Diabetes.org is a site dedicated to diabetes, and that's just one example of free resources at your fingertips. Learning the good sources of our carbohydrates, learning what foods and drinks have way more sugar than you think. All of that information will help you control and possibly prevent diabetes, right? This isn't just for people who have it. We should all be watching sugars and bad carbs and things like that. So get some information, and then just reading labels to see the levels of sugars and carbs is one of the easiest ways that you can decide if that's the right choice for you. Pay attention to those small details. They can make a big difference. And so I just said this, but I want to mention it again. Learning what drinks specifically you should and maybe shouldn't be drinking can be a huge difference maker with controlling your blood sugar. Things like Gatorade, sweet tea can have more sugar than soda. So again, read those labels, opt for good old-fashioned plain water as much as you can, and just be mindful of that. You may think you're making the better choice, but that's not always the case. Okay. So again, just be mindful. Now, this usually brings up the question of artificial sweeteners, right? There's a lot to unpack there. I'm not going to dive into it too deeply, but basically, if you've got diabetes or blood sugars are higher, this is a conversation to have with your doctor, because there's pros and cons to artificial sweeteners, right? They can be super helpful, but some have some negative effects as well. So do some research, talk with your diabetic support team to see if it's the right choice for you based on maybe what your habits are now, right? It can be a better choice than maybe what you're doing, but it might not be the best choice either. So again, do some research, talk with your doctor. And then, so next bullet point, I just talked a bunch about sugar, right? But it's not all about just the sugar. I had one of our team members say that they've had people that really only focus on those sugars, but then a big percentage of their diet were simple carbohydrates still. So simple carbohydrates are things like white bread, white pasta, white rice. Those things break down almost exactly the same as straight sugar in our bodies. So they're going to raise those blood sugars as well. So again, not only if you have diabetes, anybody, just being mindful of added sugars, the obvious ones, right? The candy bars, those things, but also making sure you're watching those carbohydrates and really not cutting out carbohydrates. So don't get me wrong, I'm not a no carb person, but getting them from natural sources like veggies and 100% whole grains. Another easy tip from our team is to help control what you're eating by bringing your own food and snacks from home if you're on the road, if you can. Also looking at menus ahead of time if you're eating out to determine the best options for you, so you won't be stuck in the moment and maybe make some of those not as great choices, right? And then next step, pivoting a little bit, is finding ways to get in movement throughout your day. I talked about how exercise can help control your blood sugar, and small things like getting up and moving when you're actually able truly do help blood sugar. Even just getting up and standing, there's research that shows that it can help regulate it. Now, again, we want to be a little more than that, and I'll talk about that in a second, but little movements throughout the day do make a difference in how our body is functioning overall. So if you're on the road, if that's your job, or if you just are in your car a lot, when you stop, walk around your vehicle a few times. If you're at a desk, set a reminder to stand up and move. Think outside the box of different ways you can incorporate movement into your days. And then lastly, the team really just wants to drive forward. Take small, realistic steps, okay? You want to be able to maintain the changes you make so you can keep that blood sugar down for good, right? So don't do too much too soon and risk falling off the wagon. One small step at a time, and you'll set yourself up for success. So I just kind of want to summarize. The team gave some fantastic tips here, but just want to touch base, kind of bring everything together. Of all the risk factors for developing diabetes that I talked about at the beginning, controlling your weight, being more active are the big ones that we have control over, right? Now, I understand within that, there might be less controls for some of you than others within those two things, but there's always something we can do. There's always something that we can control. So when it comes to weight, the American Diabetes Association recommends that people with prediabetes, so those blood sugar numbers a little higher than normal, lose about 7 to 10% of their body weight to help prevent progression into full-on diabetes. So for example, if you weigh 180 pounds right now, that's about 12 pounds for 7%. One study referenced by the Mayo Clinic found that people reduced the risk of developing diabetes by almost 60% by losing 7% of their body weight with simple diet and exercise changes. So again, if you lose, let's say 1 to 2 pounds per week, or even 1 to 2 pounds every other week, that's not a lot of time to take. And that amount of weight, those are small changes that you can do. That's what we want. We don't want 12 pounds in 1 week. That's not what I want. We want it slow, we want it steady, we want it realistic. And it doesn't take a huge amount of weight to help tremendously, as you can see from that study. So let's talk a little bit more on the diet and exercise part too. With exercise, I mentioned that exercising less than 3 times per week was a risk factor for prediabetes and diabetes. So it can be as simple as a 30-minute walk 3 days per week, or even broken up into smaller increments to get to that total of 150 minutes. That's the recommendation from the American Heart Association, from those things, as far as total minutes. So that can be your overall goal. And you can break that up, like I said. Resistance training is actually a really good way to help control blood sugar. So body weight exercises or weight training added in there can be really helpful. So you can use that as part of those 30-minute sessions, or in addition, however much time you have. But like I said before, any movement is going to help. So start there and then work your way up when you're able. Don't stress out about not having 150 minutes. That again, obviously that's the ideal goal, but if you don't have that, just do it when you can, where you can. And then with the nutrition, just keep it as simple as you can. Most of us know eating a candy bar is not the best choice for blood sugar, right? Those added sugars are an absolute killer when it comes to your overall health. So just don't overcomplicate things. Eating whole foods like your fruits, like your veggies, like your low processed meats or other proteins like eggs, healthy fats like fish, almonds, olive oil, and then whole grains, not the refined grains. Having the majority of your diet based on those types of foods is going to make your body run as efficient as possible, including blood sugar. Now, I said majority, right? You don't have to be perfect. I understand there's going to be times, we just passed Halloween, so I understand that you might have some sugar in your house right now. There's going to be times when you're not going to make the best decision. But if you start to make the better decision more often, that's where we see progress. That's where your body is going to say, thank you so much. Your body says every time that you make a better decision, I don't have to work as hard to help keep you healthy and keep your blood sugar regulated. Thinking about each decision that you make as either moving you towards having that happy, relaxed body or away can help maybe make you make those decisions a little bit easier and make the better decisions a little bit more. Okay. And then stress and sleep. I don't have enough time to go into these. Obviously, we've only got a few minutes left, but please know that getting adequate sleep helps your body regulate hormones, regulate blood sugar. Managing stress in healthy ways does this as well. So please don't forget to set small goals in small goals in those areas as well. We have a ton of webinars on all of these topics: nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep, that go much more in depth. So no matter what you want to focus on, we've got those resources to head over to. So head over to our blog, see what we've got. And then with just a few minutes left, how about a few recipes for some inspiration on the nutrition side specifically? This first one comes directly from the American Diabetes Food Hub website. Blueberry almond chicken salad lettuce wraps. Saying the name is much more complicated than actually making it. If you can see here, it's super simple. Your Greek yogurt, basil, salt, pepper, add in the chicken, blueberries, celery, scallions if you want. Use that lettuce as the wrap. Throw on the heart healthy almonds. Boom. Easy lunch, dinner, snack, whenever you want to do it. Now, don't get your hand tired by writing all these down. Download the PDF from the blog when we post it here in the next day or so, because I'm going to go on to the next one too. Zucchini meatballs. This one takes a little bit more time to throw together, but I really just wanted to give you an example of getting in whole foods in maybe an unexpected place. So again, it's not actually meat. The name's a bit misleading, but it looks like meatballs, I would say, right from that picture. But this one, again, you've got your zucchini, garlic, mix it with some breadcrumbs, make those meatballs, cook it up. And it's really, really good recipe. And then I wanted to show some quick snack ideas as well. Lower carb, lower sugar, easy to throw in a lunchbox, have with you to help curb that hunger without spiking those blood sugar numbers. That's the ideal, right? The less amount of those times that we raise it up, we can keep that average down. That's the whole goal with our blood sugar, and that's going to help us feel better. Whether you have diabetes or not, keeping sugar and bad carbs, those refined carbs, in a lower level gives you more energy. It helps you sleep better. It helps your mood. It helps your stress management. I mean, there's so many benefits just to being mindful of those types of foods. So think of these as some options for some snacks. And then quick summary, just be aware, know your numbers, right? If something's not where it should be, follow up if needed. And then whether you have issues or not, with no matter what the numbers are, there's always some small changes you can have. We should always have some small goals. You can make a huge difference in your future by making some small changes now, again, with anything. All right, It is exactly 30 minutes, but I'll stay here if anyone has questions, but just want to give a shout out to the next webinars. Last one in 2021, Finding Comfort Without Food, some stress management for the holiday season. And then 2022 is almost here. I can't believe it, but we'll talk about making some changes today for healthier tomorrow, just setting the tone for a positive 2022. And then if you do have lifestyle rewards and you need to submit some questions, these are it. Again, you can get the screenshot. You can take a screenshot now if you want to. Otherwise, the PDF slides will be available for download if you need to submit these questions for lifestyle rewards. And then our contact information. I'll leave this up as we're doing questions, but we are on social media. The blog right here, this is where you can watch this webinar in the next day or two. You can watch past webinars, like I mentioned, with some of those other topics, and register for upcoming. We'll have the full list of 2022 webinars. We'll have a post for that coming up soon as well. And then, of course, you can contact us. You can set up a time to chat with the health coach. You can email us. We're more than happy to talk about anything health related. So with that, let me see